Peter Sutcliffe is one of the most notorious serial killers of the 20th century. He's now serving life in Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital for the murders of 13 women and the attempted murder of 7 others in the late 70s. The authors of this book believe there are many more Ripper victims whose cases are unsolved. Former police intelligence officer Chris Clark bases his theory on the methods that Sutcliffe used to kill.
In the cases we're talking about, in the main, a garroted method was employed before the victim was bashed on the back of the head. In several of the cases, the body was covered over with the victim's own coat, and on another one, she was covered over with debris, similar to what Sutcliffe did to some of his victims in West Yorkshire.
He believes the murder of 14-year-old Judith Roberts on a country lane in June 1970 bore all the hallmarks of the Ripper.
I'm absolutely certain, since Monday of this week, when I obtained a copy of the pathologist's report, it clearly shows that Judith was bashed on the back of the head with a very heavy object, which I think was a walling hammer. She was undressed in a very similar method to Sutcliffe's later victims. She was then dragged into a secluded area. She was subjected to a frenzied attack to the side of her head, which left a Y mark, which is identical to what Professor G found in later Sutcliffe victims.
24-year-old Barbara Mayo was a student teacher hitchhiking from London to Yorkshire in October 1970. Her body was found a mile from the M1 in Derbyshire. She'd been raped and strangled. Scotland Yard were called in to investigate.
Well, he's an evil, calculating killer. He may have killed before, I don't know, but he most certainly will kill again, and we've got to catch him. We will catch him.
Except they didn't. But 20 years on, Barbara's case was linked to the murder of 18-year-old Jacquie Ansell-Lamb. She'd also hitchhiked from London to the north from the same place in the same year. Her body was found close to the M6 in Cheshire. Chris believes both young women could have been murdered by Sutcliffe.
They fitted with the method and also with the location where both victims started the journey. And I can actually establish that Sutcliffe, in both occasions, would have had access to that area of London at that material time.
Barbara Mayo's boyfriend at the time says he's sceptical about the Ripper connection, but welcomes any new theories.
I can't see that myself. As far as I know, a DNA profile was extracted in 1997. Given that they have a DNA profile, I can't imagine they don't also have Peter Sutcliffe's. It is good that it brings to the front the incompetence of the police and the possibility also that there's been a cover-up.
Wendy Sewell was battered to death in a cemetery in Bakewell in Derbyshire in 1973. A 17-year-old youth with learning difficulties was convicted of her murder. Stephen Downing spent 27 years in prison before his conviction was quashed. Chris says after seeing the pathologist's report, he's convinced it's the Ripper who's guilty.
Wendy was asphyxiated in very similar fashion to the garrote that I've been talking about. In fact, she had clearly had a bruise on her Adam's apple and another one at the back of her neck. Stephen Downing did not have such a piece of rope when he was arrested, nor was there anything at the scene. Unfortunately, the police did not look any further than that.
And police say they're still not looking any further than Stephen and say the case is closed.
I'm just amazed that an ex-police officer has been able to identify these, willing to come forward about it, and is wanting to fight my corner. You know, and I applaud him for that. I mean, he's putting his own self forward for criticism by current police officers and other professionals.
I know you believe that Peter Sutcliffe could have been responsible for these other murders, unsolved as yet, across the country. But he's in prison, he's serving 13 life sentences, he's never going to get out. Do we need to go through this, do you think?
Well, it's to give closure to the families of the deceased. There are also a number of surviving victims. It's to have them recognised properly and their cases reopened. And thirdly, to exonerate 3 young men who spent all of their young lives and into middle age in prison for over 25 years for a crime they clearly did not commit.
Policing was less high-tech and sophisticated when these murders were committed over 40 years ago. And although many cases are still open, Sutcliffe isn't an official suspect in any of them. Jane Hesketh, ITV News.